A rabbit eats about 3 pounds of feed for every pound of meat it puts on. A chicken does it on roughly 2. End of story, right? Chicken simply wins. Except it isn't that simple. For a few decades, the US government tried genuinely hard to convince the country to eat rabbit instead of chicken. So why did one of these animals become a global industry worth over $100 billion, while the other stayed a hobby for a few thousand backyard farmers? Start with the numbers, because they matter more than people assume. A chicken needs somewhere around 1.9 to 2 pounds of feed to produce a pound of live weight, one of the most efficient conversion rates in the entire animal kingdom, and a big part of why chicken took over the world. A rabbit needs closer to 3 pounds per pound of weight, worse than chicken by a wide margin. But that number hides something important. A rabbit can hit its ratio on grass, weeds, hay, and vegetable scraps, the kind of cheap roughage a chicken can't properly live on. A chicken needs grain, and grain has never been cheap. So the rabbit loses on pure conversion efficiency, but it can win on the cost of what's going into its mouth in the first place. Now compare the protein. Rabbit meat runs close to 33 grams per 100 grams, which actually puts it ahead of chicken breast on a like-for-like basis. And it does that with less fat and fewer calories. It's also famously low in sodium and cholesterol compared with most other meats. That's exactly the nutritional profile health-focused marketing is usually built around. On paper, rabbit should be the meat every influencer is obsessed with right now. And this isn't a new discovery. Rabbits mature fast and breed constantly. A single doe can produce 4 to 6 litters a year, with 6 to 10 kits per litter. Do the maths, and one rabbit can theoretically account for more offspring turned meat in a year than almost any other backyard animal you could raise. So if the nutrition is there, and the cheap feed argument is there even with a worse conversion ratio, something else has to explain why rabbit never became dinner. The first clue is history, and it's stranger than you'd expect. During World War II, the US government pushed rabbit meat hard. Rationing had hit beef and pork, and the Department of Agriculture ran full campaigns encouraging families to raise rabbits in their backyards. Magazines ran rabbit recipes. Victory Gardens had a 4-legged counterpart, quietly multiplying in hutches across the country. For a few years, rabbit consumption in America actually climbed. Then the war ended, and rabbit ran into a problem no other meat industry has ever really faced. Not a taste problem, not a cost problem, a branding problem. In the exact decades chicken was industrializing into the meat we know today, rabbits were becoming the stars of children's cartoons. Bugs Bunny, Thumper, the Velveteen Rabbit. An entire generation of American kids grew up associating rabbits with pets, companionship, and Easter baskets, not dinner plates. Try marketing a meat when your customer's earliest memory of the animal is a cartoon character outsmarting a hunter every Saturday morning. Chicken never had that problem. Chickens were already livestock in the public imagination. Farm animals, not household names. There was no emotional hurdle to clear, but cultural squeamishness alone doesn't sink an entire industry. The real reason rabbit never scaled is far less romantic, and it comes down to infrastructure. In the very years rabbit farming might have taken off, chicken farming was going through something historic. Companies like Tyson began building vertically integrated operations. One company controlling the breeding, the feed, the processing, and the distribution, all under one roof. The USDA built out a massive inspection and grading system specifically for poultry. Slaughterhouses were designed, standardized, and scaled for chicken carcasses on assembly lines moving thousands of birds an hour. Rabbit got none of that. There was no USDA grading system built for rabbit at poultry scale. Processing plants stayed small, regional, and expensive to run because there was never enough demand to justify building automated rabbit-specific slaughter lines the way chicken got them. And that created a brutal cycle. Low demand kept processing small and manual, which kept rabbit expensive per pound, which kept demand low. Chicken broke out of that loop in the 1950s through contract farming and vertical integration. Rabbit farmers never got the capital or the customer base to build the same machine. There's also an emotional side that farmers themselves have talked about for decades. Rabbits are quiet. They don't trigger the same hardened attachment that other livestock does, and a lot of small-scale rabbit farmers report the animals are simply harder to process at scale, both logistically and psychologically. A chicken doesn't make eye contact with you the way people describe rabbits doing. It sounds like a small detail, but multiply it across every worker on a processing line, and it becomes a real operational headache that chicken plants never had to design around. So does that settle it? Not quite. Because there's a counter-argument that's easy to miss. Chicken's dominance isn't really about which animal is more efficient. It's about which animal was easier to standardize. Chickens lay eggs you can incubate in enormous batches. Their growth cycle is remarkably uniform, which means a processor can predict exactly how big a bird will be on exactly which day. That predictability is worth more to a factory line than the cost of feed. Rabbits, for all their breeding speed, are less uniform in size and harder to schedule at industrial scale, which means more waste and more sorting per unit, on top of a feed ratio that already favored chicken. And there's a demand-side reality nobody likes to say out loud. Meat industries don't grow because a product is objectively better. They grow because someone finds a way to make it cheap enough, consistent enough, and familiar enough that a customer buys it without thinking. Chicken hit all three. Rabbit never got the chance to try because nobody built the machine that could make it cheap in the first place. So where does that leave the actual question? Should you be eating rabbit instead of chicken? Nutritionally, there's a real case. Leaner protein, lower cholesterol, and a taste most people who've tried it describe as somewhere between chicken and pork. On raw feed conversion, chicken still wins. No argument there. But rabbits can be raised almost entirely on forage and scraps that would otherwise go to waste, which is where the real cost case comes from, not the conversion ratio itself. The honest answer, though, is that rabbit isn't replacing chicken anytime soon. And it's not really about the animal at all. It's about 70 years of infrastructure that chicken has and rabbit never got. Slaughterhouses built for birds by the thousand. Grading systems written into national law. Fast food chains that turn chicken into a $5 meal. None of that exists for rabbit, and building it from scratch would take a level of investment nobody in the meat industry has had a reason to make, because chicken already solved the problem they were trying to solve. Maybe the more interesting question isn't why we don't eat more rabbit. It's what it would actually take to build an entire industry from nothing in a country that already has an efficient, cheap, culturally accepted meat sitting on every dinner table. Rabbit didn't lose purely on the feed maths. It lost because chicken got a 70-year head start on top of an already better conversion ratio. And by the time anyone looked back at the numbers, the infrastructure gap was too wide to close. There are still small rabbit farms out there. In France, in Italy, in parts of China, where rabbit never carried the same cartoon baggage and stayed a normal part of the dinner table the whole time. Consumption in those countries never dipped the way it did in the US, so the animal was never the problem. The timing was. Next time you're staring at a grocery store meat aisle, picture the version of this country where the 1940s rabbit boom kept going instead of stalling out, where rabbit got its own vertically integrated industry, its own fast food chain, its own place next to the chicken breast in the cold aisle. It isn't a stretch. It just never got the 70 years chicken did. Lean, cheap to feed if you've got scraps in a backyard, and quietly worth a second look. Even with the worst conversion number, rabbit has almost everything chicken has, except the machines and the systems built around it.